These are exciting times, let me tell you. I want to talk a little bit about this whole artificial intelligence stuff and the webinar we had this week. There's a few of us got together on Zoom and I went through what AI is really meaning to all of us. These are exciting times. I want to say a quick shout out too. I had 3 case studies this week that I did, Raymond and Leanne and Harriet. And I just want to say thanks, guys. It was really a whole lot of fun, and I am so glad I could help. These are absolutely free. All 3 of them, well, 2 of them were retirees having problems with computer stuff. And you know, I've been, at one point, like 20 years ago, when I was kind of the, computer expert sort of a thing, I've been receiving these phone calls about, hey, I get a blue screen of death. What do I need to do? And that's not what I like to do, right? Because it gets just too narrow, too specific to an individual person, their computer, their problem. So what I've decided to do, and this is another thing that I'm kind of a kick in the butt, but I've decided that, hey, I'm going to go ahead and make myself available. So I have a few time slots a week that I open up, and Mary manages that for me. In fact, if you email me at craigpeterson.com, Mary's more likely to get to your email first. By a long shot. It can take me more than a week sometimes, and I get really busy to get to those emails. So being able to sit down and do a case study with people, I think is a great thing. And then ultimately what I want to do is take those case studies, edit them up a little bit, get rid of the more private information that's in them, because we record all of them, and make some of those available to everybody. Because let me tell you, the problems people have are not unique to them. It's kind of like businesses, right? They're all about 90% the same, give or take. So it's something to seriously consider, and when you get right down to it, it's really a public service. That's what this show's about, right? That's why you guys are listening, because I provide hopefully some great content for you. And every week I get a few emails thanking me for what I do, and I really appreciate that, let me tell you, because this is a labor of love. I don't get any revenue from any advertisers or anything else. I'll let that all go to the stations, and it should, right? They've got lights to keep on. So do I. But every once in a while I pick up a new business client, and that's always rewarding for me. So shout out to those 3 for this week. And it was a busy week. It took up, I think so I think I only had 3 slots this week for these case studies for listeners. But if you're interested, you'll notice in the newsletter down in the signature area a little thing about how to be a case study if you are interested, and I can help you with your problem, whether you're a home user or big business or small business. I don't care. I'm here to help. No question about it. Well, this week, this is very, very cool, and I've done these before, but this week I had a great Zoom session. Now, Zoom, of course, everybody's been on. That's why I used Zoom. Zoom is not secure, but it didn't really matter, because this week what we talked about was the latest artificial intelligence tools that are out there. What are those? Well, ChatGPT, for example. It's pretty darn cool when you get down to it, because ChatGPT lets you do a ton of stuff and learn a ton of stuff from it. And we went through some of the things ChatGPT does pretty well, which is, just kind of vomit words. That's probably the best way to describe it, because it sure isn't great at doing any sort of analysis. In fact, it has no real ability to, other than the analysis of what's the next most likely word in this sentence. That's how this stuff works. It's generative. It just sits there and kind of generates responses. It really has no clue what you're asking for. And one of the things that I absolutely loved, Karen figured this out, my wife. She went into ChatGPT and she said, what kind of cybersecurity services can you offer? Now, this is asking ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, of course, is the big open AI thing. Everybody knows about ChatGPT. Everyone's an expert on it by now. Obviously, a little tongue-in-cheek, but I think we're over 100 million people now using ChatGPT. It's crazy, a lot of people. But they asked it, well, what can you do here for me for cybersecurity? And so it generated this long thing, and we talked about it in the webinar, that was total garbage, total fiction, right? And it talked about how they have software that looks for this type of a break-in, that type of a break-in, and how they do this type of analysis and that, and how they're going to save you from yourselves. And I sat there thinking, you know what? I came across a website from one of these managed services providers, and I think ChatGPT wrote everything up for them on their What We Do page. Because ChatGPT was talking about this software that OpenAI provides and these services OpenAI provides, et cetera, et cetera. OpenAI doesn't provide anything, any services for cybersecurity. It's absolutely incredible. And then people are taking that and using it themselves who know very little about cybersecurity. Man, I guess my life's getting a little tougher here because it used to be that people would hang up a shingle saying, yeah, I'm a cybersecurity expert, because they sign up with some big company that has everything you'll need to support your customers. And those big companies are often the wrong choice. I mean, really, really wrong choice. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how you do it. And in fact, one of them was hacked, a year and a half ago, so badly that it ended up hacking, because of this company that was being used by these managed services providers. It ended up hacking government agencies and tens of thousands of businesses worldwide. Yeah, so that someone could go and hang up a shingle saying, I are a cybersecurity expert. So it was fascinating sitting there. We generated some content for Facebook using ChatGPT, for Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. It even writes some scripts of what you might want to say and even how to say it. Now remember, it's making a lot of mistakes, and people just don't realize that. A lot of mistakes. If you don't know the business or whatever it might be that you're talking about, you're going to be led astray. You know, if you're not an expert on the Roman Empire, you probably shouldn't be asking detailed questions about it unless you're going to do a lot more research yourself. And I'm talking to you students out there, because we showed ChatGPT and some of these other ones and how they're being misused to put together history papers, English papers. The list kind of goes on and on. So it was fun. It was a whole lot of fun. It was a much smaller crowd than I expected. Now, I wanted some people to be on it, and there certainly were very interested people who paid attention to my newsletter and got that invite and responded. But that was good. That was really good, because I was limiting the number of people who could attend anyways, so that we could keep it kind of one-on-one. And that's why I also set it up as just a regular Zoom meeting. Although, as you know, as I mentioned, I'm not into Zoom. Zoom's kind of dangerous. So we had our meeting, and a lot of back and forth and a lot of demos, and I want to just shout out to everybody who was on it. I think things went really, really well. So congratulations. And thank you, everybody. It was well worth it. Now, we're probably going to do some more, and maybe longer tail, if you will. In other words, a little more specific about some tools or some applications of the tools. Kind of hard to say exactly what we'll end up doing, but we're going to do something along those lines. In fact, the case studies this week, Leanne in particular, was really kind of eye-opening to me, because it was just such a difficult thing she's trying to figure out. You know, she'd been a school teacher for years, and now she's trying to take care of her mother and also try and figure out what to do with her computer that isn't working quite right. And so what was eye-opening to me is that, yeah, there are a lot of people that don't know exactly what to do or who to trust. And she used to take her computer in for repairs down at the shop and wanted to know, okay, now I've got all my financial information in here, everything, right? You think about what you have, right? You might have loans, car loans, home loans, bank account information. And so I pulled out the information from my newsletter a few weeks ago. Do you remember the one where it said how to Fort Knox your files? I thought that was rather clever. But how to Fort Knox your files on Windows, and how to encrypt folders and how to encrypt individual files. And it was a step-by-step thing, which we're doing a lot more of. That's part of our featured tips segment. And it was something that I reviewed with her because it was perfect for her, right? The store or the repair shop needs to be able to log onto her computer in order to make sure things are working after they've got stuff fixed. But then what? Are they going to be able to get at all of her private information? So I pulled out that newsletter and showed her the Fort Knox stuff. And I put it all into a little document for her that I gave her after we reviewed it there live online. So it was fun. It was fun talking to everybody. So thanks, guys, for this week and everybody that participated in our case studies. And if you're interested, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. These are not sales things, right? I don't care if you're a home user, retired, and just don't have any money to spend on anything. This is to help. But, if you're a business, I'm more than glad to help. Stick around. The online world has changed, and nowadays your anonymity and privacy are more important than ever. We're going to even talk a little bit about what ChatGPT is doing in order to make our lives a little more, miserable. I included in my newsletter, hopefully you got it. If you didn't, it's free to anybody. It is not one of these heavy selling things. I really am trying to help, okay? This is coming from a position of love. And the newsletters for a month or two now have had in the front of them a tip. And the tip is for you. And it's a step-by-step on how to do something that's crucial to your security, your privacy, your anonymity. And it's designed to really take you maybe 10 minutes to do. And the idea is if you do one little thing a week, you're going to, after a year, be a lot further ahead. It's kind of like that 1 degree thing. Did you ever read that book? I'm trying to remember what it was called, but the difference just 1 degree makes. Just a little bit of change every week is going to get you in a whole new place within a year. So if, first of all, you are subscribed and you're not reading these, take a minute to go back in the archive. And that's what I suggest to everyone, too. If you are on my email list, you have your mail program automatically save the emails. I've even got in the bottom of the email, right near the very, very bottom, a tip on how to do that on the Google Chrome browser. There's other ways to do it on others, but it's important to save these so that you can search for whatever information you're looking for. Now, I know a lot of people will go to Google. You might try and use some of these tools like ChatGPT, but as a word of warning, these tools are not as good as having somebody who knows what they are talking about. I think it's really important because if you are just relying on some tool that's online that doesn't know much about you, doesn't know much about history, in fact, all it's usually doing is trying to find what it thinks is the best match for you based on what people have been saying, I can pretty much guarantee it's not the best idea for you. So saving those emails every week is going to make a huge change for you because you can go back and review them. You can search through them, find information about what you need. So I had in my newsletter, what we're going to talk about right now is a little bit about anonymity and privacy. And unfortunately, in this day and age, those two things actually mean almost exactly the same thing. Because unless you have some form of anonymity online, you are not going to have any real privacy. You might remember, this caused quite a storm a couple of years ago. I had an article that said, lie to your bank. That was my tip, lie to your bank. And the real idea behind this wasn't that you should be lying to your bank. Obviously, if there's official forms, if there's some government thing that you got to take care of, you don't want to lie about it. But if some bank wants to make some sort of an offer to you, you sign up for something, whatever it might be. And we're not talking about a bank account here or something else that might have to be reported to the IRS or other agency. Use a fake name. I have 5,000 records in a spreadsheet of fake names, dates of births, addresses, all kinds of fake information, because what I'm trying to do is just have a little privacy online. If someone doesn't need to know who I really am, they're not going to find out. Some of these identifiers, how do you say that? Some of these pieces of identification are male, some are female, they're all kinds of different ages, and I use them when I sign up for different things. And for 30 years now, probably longer, ever since I first got hacked and decided I needed to help other people not get hacked themselves, I have been using unique email addresses whenever someone asks me for an email. Now, you might ask me, hey, Craig, how do you possibly use a different email address? If you look in my 1Password, in fact, you'll see that I have all kinds of website information in there. It includes things about special notes, usernames, passwords, just kind of all of the stuff you might expect. And there are a lot of them in there. I have over 2,000 entries in 1Password. Well, that equates to probably hundreds and hundreds of websites, which equates to hundreds and hundreds of emails. Now, there are a few ways you can do this fake email thing. What I've been doing for a long time is not a fake email, it's a real email, is I've been using something called plus addressing. So my email address is, as you guys know, it's me@craigpeterson.com, right? I get emails from you guys every week thanking me for what I do, my wife and Mary and everybody for all of the stuff we're doing. And it's great. Please do. I'd love to hear from you, me@craigpeterson.com. But if I sign up for something and I want to use my me@craigpeterson.com mailbox to receive those emails, I have turned on something called plus addressing. So I might have a website that I go to. So let's say it's campaign.com. So what I would do for an email address is I'd say me, M-E, the plus sign, campaign, or campaign.com at craigpeterson.com. So what happens is that email address then is sent to me plus campaign at craigpeterson.com. It gets to my mail server, and my mail server knows, okay, what he's doing here is he wants me to flatten this into just me at craigpeterson.com. But it leaves the whole to address alone. So what I can do now is I can apply filters. Yeah, it does get a little complicated if you're trying to really kind of remain a little bit anonymous and keep your privacy online. But okay, great. So now it says flatten it. Here's the email, goes into my me box. And then I have a filter that says, well, if I get a mail from me plus campaign, what I want you to do is put it into this folder. And it goes into that folder. Isn't that handy? Or if I never want to hear from anyone again and I hit unsubscribe on their email and I'm still getting emails from them, I say, hey, put that in the big bit bucket in the sky. In other words, trash. And off it'll go, right into trash. Now, there are many ways to do this. In some cases, you have to turn it on explicitly. And one of the places that you might have to turn it on explicitly is if you're using Microsoft 365. Although I think now they may have it set up so that it's going to work for you and you don't have to have turn it on, right? So if you have a Microsoft 365 email address, or in whatever email address is, just try it. Send it to your email address, but right before the @ sign, put in plus and then something, plus test. And what'll happen is it'll show up in your mailbox or it won't. So that's one way to do it for a little bit of privacy. If you are an Apple user, you now have a new feature, which allows you to have Apple generate anonymous email addresses for you. So the email comes in and goes into your regular Apple mailbox. And then again, you can do the same types of things with your filters. But Apple's generating just random email addresses for you, which is really quite cool. There are a lot of flexible things that you can do there. One other one is Firefox has something very similar to that now with their mail, Mozilla, and there are a few others that you can find online. It's important to do. So we've got 10 tips to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online. So we're going to run through those as soon as we get back. Visit me online. If you're not on the email list yet, on the free weekly newsletter, craigpeterson.com/subscribe. I promise it'll be worth signing up. We're going to go through the 10 steps that I outlined in my free newsletter to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online. Nowadays, anonymity and privacy are pretty much the same thing. I have talked about VPNs many times. People tend to think that if they're using a VPN, automatically, suddenly, for some strange reason, they are secure, right? Because it's encrypted, and it's encrypted. That means everything's going to be wonderful. The answer to that is no, and that is not true for a number of reasons. There's some things you have to truly consider. So let's talk about VPNs a little bit. First of all, they are encrypted as a rule, right? But I want to kind of give you an analogy that I came up with some years ago when I was teaching one of these VPN webinars. And that analogy is you're driving a car. And let's say that you are driving from San Jose, California, on up to Oakland. So you've got some roads to drive on. You're going to go across a bridge, the beautiful new Oakland Bay Bridge, and then you're going to end up in Oakland, California. That's assuming you want to go to California, okay? There's some pretty stuff out there. But anyways, that's a separate issue entirely. Or let's say you want to go from Southie in Boston on up north, right up to New Hampshire, or you name it, right? But I want a bridge in your mind. Think of a bridge, Brooklyn Bridge, whatever it might be. The VPN, I'm going to equate to the bridge. The VPN is carrying you and your data. It's carrying your car as you're driving. But before you get on that bridge, you're on roads, regular streets, maybe small streets, maybe scary streets. Then you're on the bridge. And then you're off the bridge and you're back on streets, aren't you? You got some big streets, some small streets, some scary streets, some bright streets, some dark streets. We're trying saying that fast. The VPN is secure. If it might be, right? It probably is. So your data is secure as it is on that VPN going across the bridge. However, your data is exposed, just as you in your car are exposed while you're driving on those other streets. You know, the back roads, the big streets, the little streets, all that sort of stuff. You are exposed. And when it comes to VPNs, most of these VPN servers are sitting in big data centers. Most of them are rented data center space. So they can be at an Amazon Web Services data center. They might be at a Microsoft Azure center. There's many, many more than that, but we'll just use those two as examples. If you are a bad guy, where are you going to go to get people's data? This is kind of like Willie Sutton, right? Where he allegedly said, when asked, why do you rob banks? Because that is where the money is, right? You're not going to go and rob a lemonade stand that some kids have on the corner and walk away with $10. You're going to try a bank that has a lot of money, correct? So off you go buying what now? A VPN service. That service is actually hosted in a data center, and that data center may well be tracking all connections. It probably is, frankly, in and out of that data center. So now you got a few different interesting problems. You got the bad guys trying to hack what? Are they going to try and hack the lemonade stand the kids have for $10? Or are they going to try and hack a VPN server that's hosted in a public data center where they might get access to thousands, tens of thousands of people's accounts, information, where they're going, and maybe even trick a few people and maybe get at their bank accounts, right? That list goes on and on. On top of it, a lot of these, and some of the most major VPN sellers, if you will, the providers that you can find, some of the biggest ones out there who have said, we don't do any logging, we don't do any tracking, in fact, did both logging and tracking. The VPN providers, you see a whole bunch of them, right? They are actually owned by very few people and companies. Does that make sense to you? So they'll have one guy, in fact, who was shut down, had, I think it was 20 different VPN provider companies that he owned. All different names, all different marketing, and yet he owned them all, and he was selling your data. So these commercial VPN services have proven for the most part that they're not to be trusted. Now, I know some people do trust some of them. There's a website out there that says, hey, well, here's the best VPNs and privacy and security in 2023. And they name a few different ones, like NordVPN, ExpressVPN, and you hear these advertised on the radio, you're in, online, etc., etc. Interesting problems, because we're all faced with them. What do we do with our data? I want to point something out that you may not be really conscious of, and that is, if you're going to a website, let's say it's your bank, even if it's CraigPeterson.com. If you go there right now in your web browser, let's do a little walk along here to CraigPeterson.com. Look in the URL bar, no matter where you're going, your bank or whatever, kids' soccer team. You'll see a little lock right to the left. Usually it varies a little bit from browser to browser, but a little lock. Click on the lock. And it's going to pop up a little thing saying CraigPeterson.com, connection is secure. Now, if you click on that, you're going to get connection details. And it says, okay, it is secure and the certificate is valid. Well, there's a few things going on here that you need to be aware of that, again, aren't obvious by looking at it. First of all, what does it mean when the browser says the connection is secure? What it means is that the browser's connection to the server where craigpeterson.com is hosted, or your bank is hosted, or whatever is hosted, that connection from your browser, from the moment it leaves your browser until it gets to that server on the other side, is encrypted. Kind of sounds like a VPN, doesn't it? Because it is. Now, your ISP, whoever's providing your internet service, can tell, okay, you went to craigpeterson.com if they really cared. But what they can't do is see what you are doing at craigpeterson.com. So you got to kind of question yourself. Do you want to be trusting that your internet service provider, whoever it is, Comcast, Verizon, T-Mobile, you name it, or do you want to trust them with the knowledge that you went to this bank or you went to that website? Or do you want to trust a VPN service, some of which are run by criminals, and that's proven fact, and others that might be hacked and they might not even be aware of it right now? It's an interesting dilemma. So I've got an answer for that, and we'll be talking about this. Again, we're reviewing the 10 tips that I had in my newsletter to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online. Make sure you get my next newsletter. You missed this one. We got a featured tip every week, all for free. craigpeterson.com/subscribe. You'll find it right there. Well, I've got another tip on VPNs, but I'm going to tell you now how to be anonymous. I mean anonymous with a capital A online. And that's important if you want to have privacy, but there's risks involved too. Most of the browsers that you use on a day-to-day basis track you. I can guarantee you that most of your internet service providers track you. There's no way around it, unfortunately. They have to do it as part of their daily business, but they also do it for a lot of other reasons, including what to sell you, how to sell you stuff, right, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there is something out there that was developed by the United States Navy and is continued to be maintained by the Navy, and it's called the Onion Network. Now, the Onion Network ties into the Tor browser. Maybe it's the other way around. It depends how you want to look at it. The Onion Network was set up to allow dissidents in foreign countries to be able to talk to us, to talk to their CIA handlers, to organize things within the country. It's the sort of thing that I would expect that people in Ukraine are using. Military people use it. It goes on and on. One of the biggest users of this whole network is bad guys, right? It's just like the internet isn't what you might think it might be. Well, actually, more than half of the traffic on the internet right now is streaming television, which is, I think, kind of a waste of bandwidth. But that's a different story. I definitely prefer it over these silly contracts that these cable companies try and get you in. But the bad guys use this Onion Network as well, and we're going to get into that and why that's a little bit of an issue. But journalists use it, particularly in countries where they might have a problem with the government because of what they're doing, what they're researching online. It can be a real problem, really, for everybody. So they put it together, the Department of Defense, to be able to communicate with these people, let them organize so that they can, topple governments and whatever else that they want to do or need to do. So the Tor browser is a free and it's open source browser. It's based on Mozilla Firefox, which is one of the more secure browsers out there. And it lets you browse the web anonymously using this Tor network, also known as the Onion Network. We're going to start calling it Tor, T-O-R, because that's the name of the browser you use. So this is a browser you would use if you want as much anonymity as you possibly can get. I would be careful about using it in a couple of different use cases. You don't want to do your banking with it. There's a few other things because of the bad guys that are lurking in those dark alleys that are out there. So the Tor network routes your traffic through multiple nodes. Now, these nodes are volunteer-run servers that have internet access. Or it might not even be like a server. It could just be someone's computer sitting in their home. And these volunteers are providing it in order, again, to allow dissidents, reporters who actually want to do their jobs, to be able to talk to people. Now, it anonymizes the data of anyone that's using the Tor browser, and it makes it really difficult to trace because what it's doing is it's hopping multiple places. Kind of think of the movies you've seen where, okay, he's going through this, he's going through that, he's going through this, guess what? You can't tell where they're going through, at least not with the level of precision you see on these movies and TV shows. It's really not there. But it's all encrypted as it goes from site to site. And when you go to a website, do you realize that you could be opening 100 different connections to that web server because every one of the graphics has to be downloaded individually. Typically, we're not going to get into the latest technology, but just sticking with the typical, right? And the text on the page is another file it has to download. So there can be hundreds of things that it's doing and where it's going. So what the Tor network is doing now is it's taking that web page and getting all of these elements, all of these pictures, all of this text from different places in the country and potentially the world, so that no one who's monitoring on the far side, where it comes out of this effectively a VPN, no one knows who the actual originator was. Which is why the bad guys really love it, and I hate it that they do this. But we got to live with them, right? They're out there. We're never going to stop them all. So it's providing a real high level of privacy to anyone who uses it, anonymity, security, as you are accessing websites and services and networks that aren't blocked from the Tor network. Because there are some. Right? Banks often do this. There are known what are called entry and exit points to this onion network, this Tor network. And so in some cases, they're blocked. I know for most of my clients, the businesses that I work with, we block the Tor browser because we don't want bad guys using it to remain anonymous if they're trying to hack in, right? Does that make sense? So the Tor browser also, because again it's Mozilla Firefox under the hood, and they're adding some more features, but includes some additional security features. It's got a script blocker, it's got an anti-fingerprinting system, and of course support for HTTPS everywhere, which is a browser extension you should install anyways. It's called HTTPS everywhere, and it just double checks if you're going to a non-secure website that's not encrypted, using that little lock symbol VPN I was talking about, then it'll check to see if that website actually has a secure side to it. Anti-fingerprinting is important too. The Europeans started this trend with their GDPR, their privacy regulations, and a few states have kind of done the same thing, where they're saying, well, you should have control over your information. So there now are cookie notices everywhere on the internet, and I'm sure you've noticed them, right? Only allow the necessary cookies to be able to use the website. Maybe add to that the ones that improve your speed, your download speed. Maybe allow all of them, right, so that you can be tracked. Well, there's a way around that, and that's called fingerprinting. So the way fingerprinting works is even if you have cookies turned off, they can query your browser and the information about your computer in order to identify you, fairly uniquely, in fact. Most people don't have the exact same configurations of everything and plugins on their browsers, et cetera, versions of the browser software. So that's called fingerprinting, and that's how they get around the cookie thing. Again, it's just another government ploy to make you think they're trying to make you more private or safer in reality. No, none of that's true. Even Google's come out with this thing saying, yeah, we're not going to use cookies anymore. What they're doing is they're putting you in a box. So rather than having a very explicit definition of you, what you're interested in, your age, your family, the cars you own, et cetera, what they're doing is they're grouping you with about 1,000 other people. So they're saying, yeah, we're not identifying individuals. No. What are they doing? They're putting you in a bucket, a pretty small bucket, and then that's even of more value to a lot of the advertisers. Pick the bucket. So using the Tor browser, they've got all of this anti-fingerprinting built into this. Now, when you're using the Tor browser, you can access websites also that are only available through the Onion network. Remember, the Onion network is a network set up by the Navy. It's for dissidents and others to be able to communicate. And you can tell if it's an Onion URL by the extension, which is .onion, right? And it's something you can look at and look for. And there's even a search engine. There's a couple, but DuckDuckGo, I'm going to check right now as we're talking, has built into it an Onion capability. Let's see, Onion network. Okay. And there it is, Tor project, Onion routing. So anyways, so you can get to these different websites. This is what is known as the dark web, the Onion network. And it's not all dark, but there certainly is a lot of criminal activity on it. And frankly, that's where part of this warning comes from. The warning is that the Onion network, like any other internet-based service, has some potential risk associated with it. It has similar risks to using a commercial VPN, as I talked about earlier. And the most common risk associated with using Tor and the Onion network is that your data is sent and received over the network and can be monitored and tracked at different points by malicious actors. Now, it's hard to do that. It's designed to be very hard to do, but it can still happen. These malicious guys, the bad guys, can exploit the network. They can set up, remember, volunteer nodes, little servers on the network. They can set up malicious Tor nodes that intercept traffic, steal data potentially. Other potential risks associated with it include maybe spreading some malware and viruses through the network that can cause damage to your system. So there's no guarantees, and I hate to say this, right? But there's no guarantees that you're going to be safe, kind of no matter what you do online. But when it's about protecting your anonymity, it is all about layers. And I've got a great article about layers up on my website as well. And those layers are easily accessible to anybody through the Tor browser. It's available for free for all of your machines, Windows, Mac, Android, iOS. And if you need something a little anonymous, that's the thing to use. Now, there are 8 more tips here that I have not gone through. Plus, I've got a VPN cybersecurity cheat sheet that you can grab as well. So if you want these 10 tips to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online, just let me know. Email me at craigpeterson.com, and Mary or Karen or I will make sure you get it. Me, M-E, at craigpeterson.com. Take care. Well, this was a very popular subject in the newsletter this week. It's how to retain some privacy online, clearing your browser history, wiping away your online footprint. I think it's important to do, so we're going to go through it right now. This is Well, I guess it's kind of funny. It's not funny at the same time. But there are a lot of things that I teach in my courses. There's a lot of simple things that you can do yourself. Of course, we do tons of stuff for our clients, but they're paying us for our time. In fact, they're subsidizing me here now. There's no question about that. But I want to get the information out. And my wife and I have been talking about it for a very long time. So Karen said, hey, why don't we start putting some of this stuff into your newsletter, start putting it onto the website as well. The stuff being, here are the simple things you can do in like about 5 minutes that are going to help. So, of course, what did I say? Well, if you want to do that, go ahead and do that, and I'll review it, and I will make updates to it. So you kind of have to do it. You need to take this bull by the horns, and that's what she's done. So this week was the first week I've done this in a long time, but we put it into the newsletter calling it Craig's Featured Tip. And this week, it's a step-by-step guide to clearing your browser history and wipe away your online footprint, which is an important thing to do for a lot of reasons. Now, I know I talk to people that say this all of the time before I kind of explain things, but they say, well, I have nothing to hide. Why would I worry? Well, of course you have stuff to hide. You don't want those bad guys that are out there phishing you to be able to get a leg up on you. So phishing, of course, as you probably already know, is where the bad guys will send you an email pretending to be the bank, pretending to be a friend, right? It goes on and on. But pretend is kind of the operative word there. And how do they know anything about you? Well, they know because they've stolen information, and that's why you should be checking haveibeenpwned.com. Sign up for their free service. I think it's fantastic what they're doing. And you should be clearing some of this stuff from your browser history. Because when you go to a website, what ends up happening is they set a cookie. And that cookie does a few different things. And this is kind of the interesting part, right? Don't zone out here on me. But the idea for cookies came about because websites are what are called stateless. So in other words, you ask for a web page and ta-da, there's the web page. But the website itself really doesn't know anything about you. You don't have a constant stream of information. So if you go from the home page to the shopping page, and then from there you go to the page about, shoes, let's say, and now you are, 3 pages deep into the website. But the website still doesn't know. Well, how about if you buy a pair of shoes? What's going to happen? Well, it's going to go into your cart. Well, how does it keep track of the cart? How does it know that when you hit the little go back on that screen or the breadcrumb trail that's up there on the top, how does it know what it is that you have been doing so that it can show you what you put into your can, right? Into your shopping cart. How does it know anything about you? Well, it only knows something about you because of the cookies. So it sets this little cookie, which is a unique identifier. So now when you go to that website, just you go to the home page, it sets a little cookie. So it says, okay, this is session number blah, blah, blah. And then you go to the shopping page. So it'll ask the server, hey, what's your cookie session ID? And your web browser will tell them my session ID is thus. And there can be a little bit of data as well that it keeps, but typically it's not really much of a database. And then you go from there to the shoes page, and then you click on something, right? And it's all based around that session ID. That's why that came to being. Otherwise, you would end up having very, very complicated URLs. And of course, like anything else, we actually have both now. It kind of depends on the website that you're at. But here's where things kind of started going downhill, and that is when the marketers, they're the first ones that really did this, saw, oh, wait a minute now, there is a unique session ID. And in fact, I can store in that cookie or in another cookie some information about you. So last time you were here, you had this session ID. Well, who are you? And so it'll look it up using your cookie, and it will have some sort of unique identifier that they can then use to track you over multiple sessions. It's kind of like when you walk into a big retailer out there and you connect to their Wi-Fi, or nowadays you don't even have to connect to it, but it sees your MAC address, it sees your hardware's unique serial number, and now it knows, hey, wait a minute, she's been here before, and here's where she went, and here's what she did, here's what she bought. So there's a lot that can be done there. And the marketers are now moving on. Well, they've got the next level, don't they? There's always one more level. And this next level isn't just, oh, okay, I'm keeping a database on that person. But how about if I check and see if there were cookies that were set by some other website out there? You know, where might it be? They were at Zappos.com. And I'm Skechers.com. So you're on Skechers' website, and it says, okay, any cookies here? Zappos cookies? I'm looking for this cookie. And the browser would come back and say, yeah, here it is, right? Or Allbirds. I never tried those shoes. Supposed to be the world's most comfortable shoes, they say. It can find out about you and where you have been online, and in many cases, even what you looked at when you were online, or even what you bought while you've been online. And not even necessarily today. It can track it over a longer period of time. So that was the next evolution, which was a problem, obviously, because you don't want all that tracking going on. Well, now you also have the bad guys using this sort of information in order to generate some phishing stuff for you on the website. So you're visiting a site that's been compromised. You don't know it, right? But it's been compromised. And it starts pulling up all kinds of information about you based on your browser and the cookies that are set in it. Now, Google's said, okay, well, we're going to do away with those types of tracking cookies, which is what they're called, and we are going to have just a general categorization. So we're not tracking you, not tracking Craig Peterson. No, heaven forbid. We're just going to set an identifier for you. So for me, it might be something that says, I'm a young guy. And I like this, that, and the other thing, right? So they're going to put us all into a bucket. Maybe the bucket has 1,000 people in it. But that's really all they want and all they need in order to sell ads to advertisers to direct at you, right? So they don't really need to track you, but they do need to put you into a bucket. So that's how Google is solving this. Well, my article this week is really, I think it's pretty good because it explains some of this stuff about clearing your browser's footprint and why it is essential. So I got 5 reasons right there why it's essential. Some steps you can follow if you want to clear your browser footprint. And again, another 5 here. And then the risks of third-party cookies. That's what I was just talking about, where they look up to see if Zappos was a recent visit of yours. And again, a bunch of points. And then how to clear your browser history to keep your risks lower. So this is the part that Karen put together, which is really quite good. So she goes into Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge. So all of the major browsers, and tells you exactly what to do. Click on the 3 dots in the upper right, then do this and do that. And I also in here go into what the potential consequences are of doing some of these things. So if you do clear cookies, some of your automatic logins are not going to work. So you got to keep some of this stuff in mind. Right, you want to have to re-log into that website. Well, maybe you should be re-logging in. Maybe you shouldn't let those cookies stay. And maybe you should not be using the autofill on your web browser for usernames and passwords on websites, because that brings up additional problems. So a whole bunch of stuff, you'll find it on my homepage. I got to really fix up my website a little better. But right there. So I want to also point out one other thing. I've talked about some of these AIs, and I call them AIs because that's what everybody calls them. It's like the term hacker. Hacker was never a bad term. It was just somebody that was hacking at software, right? Most computer programmers were hackers. Anyways, AIs. So on that article, you'll notice the graphic at the top. It's a young lady in front of a computer. That graphic I was able to generate using Dolly, which is artificial intelligence graphic generator from our friends over at OpenAI. So check that out as well. Let me know what you think. Just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. I think, they did a very good job, this AI. Yeah, doesn't have enough fingers, but, it's just a drawing. I'm not too fussy. We've come a very long way. All right, craigpeterson.com/subscribe if you're not a subscriber already. Stick around. We'll be right back. Most of us go to a niece, a nephew, son, daughter, whoever it might be, in order to figure out how do I make this work? Well, there's another study out right now that shows maybe you shouldn't be trusting Gen Z for cybersecurity. Okay, I'm about to lump everybody together that's in the Generation Z, right? It's like that saying, there's only two types of people. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's one type that divides people into two types and another type that doesn't, right? So that's probably the only generalization that's actually true. So, take this with a grain of salt, or maybe a little bit more. But the problem that we're seeing right now with Generation Z when it comes to cybersecurity is they are the most tech-savvy generation. That's why you go to them, right, to get help with things. But they're also the least experienced in cybersecurity, and frankly, it's experience that matters the most. Experience is absolutely huge, because you have to look at something and realize what the potential consequences are. And how do you do that, right? What's the best way to learn? Well, to fail, right? The best way, I don't know, but it certainly makes sure that you learn. And so if you've been through enough failures, you may well stand a chance of not having that same failure again in the future. And that's where the problems start. Generation Z is also more likely to take risks online. They'll click on suspicious links. They'll download unknown files. They're less likely to use good passwords or two-factor authentication. And they may be aware that their actions have some of these potential negative consequences, such as identity theft or data breaches, but in many cases they're not. And in many cases they've kind of given up. I have a son, for instance. You know what I do for a living, right? I do and have now for over 30 years myself been involved in various aspects of internet cybersecurity. Very long time. So I've seen it all pretty much. So you would expect my kids to be conscious, really conscious of cybersecurity issues. Well, one of my sons, who is actually my youngest, is not a Gen Z. He's right on the cusp there, almost is a Gen Z. He's typically classified as millennial. Gen Z is typically those who were born between 1997 and 2010. Okay, that's the bottom line. He's not safe at all. He will do anything he thinks it's crazy to do to take an extra step or two to make sure you're safe online. Like he just hates the idea of having to use a password manager. He hates the idea of two-factor authentication. It just slows him down too much. And I just don't get it, because you can have everything stolen. But then on the other hand, who hasn't had their stuff stolen? Not even necessarily from them, but from these third parties. Look at what's happened. Look at what has happened with the massive credit bureaus. one in particular that comes to mind, and how they have all of this personal information on you and how that information has gone on to be stolen. Well, this survey that I had just conducted down in Australia is showing that 2/3 of small business owners mistakenly believe that tech savviness equates to cyber safety skills. Absolutely not true. So unfortunately, it found that the Gen Zs are among the least safe in the country and are more likely to rate cybersecurity as a low or medium threat. And on top of that, they're struggling more than other groups to identify and prevent some of the most common cyber attacks that small businesses face, like identity theft, malware attacks, ransomware. On the other hand, the survey found that the Gen Xers and upper millennials are the most likely group to take cybersecurity seriously. This is all in the article that was in the newsletter this week that I wrote and posted. This one I did myself. Karen didn't help with this one. Okay. So what are the best qualifications for an employee or somebody else who's handling your cybersecurity? Well, I think the best indicator is someone with experience. Of course, you look at me and say, well, Craig, you got a lot of experience, so you are biased. Well, yeah, I probably am. Because every time, remember I said I've been doing this for 30 years? Every time that we have gone into a business, and in that business we have tried to clean things up, every time there have been glaring, massive cybersecurity problems. I mean, massive. We've got another new client here that we picked up, and you know already that I don't take too many new clients, right? But we picked them up. Great guy, listener to the show for years, reads my newsletter religiously, clicks through on the links, and really tries to understand this stuff. And the company that was doing his cybersecurity, right? It's not him. He hired a third-party outside company. They just completely messed everything up. I mean, really, really, really badly. So he ended up getting hacked, and they said, okay, well, we're going to tighten it up. We need this $10,000 piece of hardware, and it's going to solve your problems. And of course, they didn't do anything right. He's got this hardware. He's got some decent hardware, but it's not configured right. It's not set up right. It's not going to protect him. And he's in a business where there are regulations, and if they get nailed, he could lose that business, and that business is his retirement, right? It just goes on and on. It's absolutely crazy. So the best qualifications, real-world experience is the most valuable. That's hands-on experience, handling real-world security incidents, performing security tasks is way more valuable than theoretical knowledge that you get through education. Number 2, the education is probably not up to date. School teaches you how to learn, college, university, but when we're talking about cybersecurity, the stuff is changing on a weekly, daily, sometimes basis, okay? It's constantly evolving. And the information and techniques that are taught in schools and a lot of these certifications are quickly outdated. Experience also gives you a broader range of skills. So, for instance, when I'm going in there to this new client, they've got a guest Wi-Fi posted up on the wall. Here you go. Here's the password. Get on the guest Wi-Fi. Well, the companies that had been in before us set this up so that it was a completely flat network. You could get onto the guest Wi-Fi and access every machine in every office that my client has because it was all tied together with no blocks, no firewalls, no VLANs. It's incredible, right? But when you've got this broader range of skills, you go in and say, I've seen problems with this before. Let's have a little bit of a deeper look. And that deeper look showed exactly what I just described to you. So a combination of education, experience, you've got to be continuing your education, you've got to be staying on top of it. And I know a lot of people who are on the email list, the weekly list, and use it as their education. So I've got a bunch more stuff in there, more key points. You'll find it, of course, in this week's newsletter and on my website. So just go to CraigPeterson.com/subscribe if you haven't subscribed, or if you thought you subscribed but you haven't seen my newsletter this week, right there, CraigPeterson.com/subscribe. And if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I do a little free consulting every week. I set aside a few hours, and maybe you should be a case study. Me at CraigPeterson.com. Well, the tech layoffs have hit a lot of people, but I want to look at the real numbers, and I also want to look at something I've been paying attention to really for quite a few years, and that's the whole H-1B visa program, the foreign workers we have. When you get right down to the numbers, there have been a lot of people laid off. Already this year, we're looking at over 78,000 tech industry workers who've lost their job. 2022, there were about 160,000 that lost their jobs, according to layoffs.fyi. But these layoffs, are hard on individuals, but the numbers really aren't enough yet to put a dent in the massive job market in the tech business. And as a whole, the U.S. tech industry, which does include these big tech companies like Google and Apple and all of these others that have been laying off, the tech industry added employees for the 25th consecutive month in December. And that's according to CompTIA, which is a trade industry. The number of people who are working in tech occupations, now that means we're talking about computer-related technical jobs like software developers, network engineers, data analysts, was at a record high of about 6.5 million people, and their unemployment rate was near a record low of 1.8%. Compared to, depends what numbers you believe, but maybe 3.5%. So it's certainly possible those numbers have shifted over the last couple of months, but tens of thousands of layoffs won't move the needle that much when we're talking about percentage. 59% of people, by the way, who have tech jobs don't actually work in the tech industry like I think most of us think. Now, this is according, again, to some stats from CompTIA. The number of people in percentage that have worked, percentage, that have worked in the tech industries for the last decade has stayed about the same, because even as finance, healthcare, retail companies started requiring more tech talent to help them, move on to these new digital platforms, the little iPads and things they use for checkout, automating businesses, the tech industry, especially software development, grew too. So that kept the percentages about the same. So it's really interesting to look at all of those numbers. Google's layoffs in California included 30 in-house massage therapists. Yeah. It included chefs, some of these chefs, Michelin star chefs, that worked at the headquarters. So that doesn't really bode well when you talk about tech workers. Yeah, they're working for a tech company, but many of these people were not high tech. They weren't programmers, etc. They were people in HR, payroll, just all kinds of jobs. So those percentages stay about the same. We're talking the majority of people in the tech business aren't actually programmers or the high-tech type of people. So it's interesting to look at all of these numbers, isn't it? And certainly it can hurt, but here's the other nice thing. Even though there's been some downsizing, the number of open jobs is pretty high. Now, where I get kind of depressed about the open jobs is that these businesses that are hiring, the bigger ones, not so much the small ones, unless they're using one of these hiring websites, they're all using AI. AI, of course, being a form of machine learning, where you have a computer program that looks through the resumes, looks at the job posting and says, okay, this person matches. Yes, they have 5 years, they have this degree, they've done that, they've done this. Ta-da, you're in. But what we've been finding is that these automated systems, and you can use them, you've heard them advertised on the radio and elsewhere before, these systems are not good at picking people who would be good in a field, but maybe don't match all of the courses or some of the certifications that they want. And unfortunately, many of us business owners, as well as hiring people, have relied very, very heavily on those. That's a real problem because of the amount of focus that really has been put onto these automated systems to find people. We find a great match within 24 hours. Yeah, well, that's an automated system. How about all of the other people that would have done a very, very good job in that position, but were completely overlooked because the computer did not see the advantage of it? Do you see where I'm going with that? So we've lost a lot of jobs from a lot of people working in the U.S., in the tech industry primarily is what we've been talking about. But we've seen more jobs created in the tech industry than we've lost. So some of those numbers, I think, are kind of the fear porn angle, right, where they're saying, hey, listen, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Isn't that kind of the bottom line? Siri's jumping in with the fear porn. But overall, you can find jobs. So that's really an interesting way to look at it, I thought. And it's a great article here that I'm looking at from Fortune magazine that was published right at the beginning of February. But they're talking about what can you do, the 12,000 employee cut at Google in late January, and what does that mean to all of us? And ultimately, the talent is going. Now, where are they going? Well, it's turned out that many of these people are going to new careers entirely. They've fed up with high tech. Many of them are starting new businesses, which is a good thing, but it can take a long time to get to where you want to be. And frankly, if you've been working for somebody for years, you may not want to jump that ship too quickly. Be very, very careful. But, it's sitting out there. It's something I've done for many, many decades I've been out on my own. And I've had employees, and I work with my family now primarily. But I think it's a good thing. So I put an article up this week. It's an update of an older article that I had about the H-1B visas. And the H-1B visa is what is used by companies to bring foreign workers in. I had a couple of people who were working on H-1B visas for me back in the day. I think they were both actually from India. And I was kind of disappointed in some ways and not in others. So I paid them the same wage that I would pay an American, although many companies do not do that, including a couple of these big consulting firms that are actually based in India. We could talk about that one for a very long time and how it has hurt my business greatly because of some of the cheating some of these companies, these consulting firms have been doing. But the idea is you have an H-1B visa when you need employees that have certain abilities that you haven't been able to find in the U.S. So you run ads online, you used to be in newspapers, and then you have to submit all of that paperwork saying, hey, I can't find anybody, here's someone overseas, I want to bring him in. And you do. But what's been happening is a lot of these businesses, like these consulting firms I made reference to, don't pay the H-1B workers fairly. It's in some ways it's slave labor. Many of these people, even in the high-tech business with H-1B visas, are multiple people in a small apartment that they're living in, paid really, really low wages, which again is against the regulations and against the laws. And they're just doing it. So now that we've got these tech layoffs, these people are also suffering. But you know what? It's harder for them to jump jobs because they have to be sponsored in order to stay in the U.S. As I've been saying for a long time, it's time to revamp the H-1B visa program. And high tech, it's taking care of me and my family quite well over the years. Stick around. When electric vehicles and smart chargers are plugged into our critical infrastructure, what could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out plenty. Great article in the newsletter this week from Dark Reading about EVs. We have talked about electric vehicles so much here over the years, and some of the serious problems that exist with electric vehicles. And of course, it's kind of everything, right? From they sure as heck are not green. They may not have anything coming out of their tailpipes, but the manufacturing of the vehicles, including the batteries and all of the mining and the overburden and the shipping and everything else that goes into these makes them definitely not a great value for the environment, right? It's you've really got two different types of people here that are kind of fighting for it and against it. And it was amazing to me to hear about a problem that's been happening off the coast of New Jersey. And this problem is humpback whales turning up dead on the seashore. The seashore, I know I can say it. And there's debates about exactly why. But the interesting part to me is that you have two ultra-left-wing groups who are now fighting with each other. You've got these crazy people on the environmentalist side, right? And then you've got the wacko global warming / climate change people. So the climate change people are saying we've got to stop spending money on cars and getting all of this fuel, diesel, gasoline, our home heating oil. We got to get rid of all of it, and we got to move over to solar and wind. And now you've got the greenies on the other side saying, well, wait a minute now. Your wind farms off the coast are killing the whales. Interesting, isn't it? Of course, neither side listens to any other side, so I don't think they're going to get very far, right? There's no room for reasoned discussion here about any of that stuff. Obviously, they haven't even discussed really all of the hundreds of thousands of birds that are killed every year, including some endangered species by these wonderful windmills. There's no logic to any of this. We've talked about that 100 million times. So we now have another problem that's come to light. And that is these electric vehicles need to be charged, right? Let's putting everything else aside. All of the pollution from them, the fact that a Tesla at 150,000 miles could be costing you $10,000 a year in maintenance, like it is. Some people out there have seen some articles that they've posted about it. And, you have to replace your batteries. Well, you might as well just buy a brand new Tesla, throw it away. And one guy went ahead and basically did that. He lit it afire because it just cost more than the car was worth to change the batteries. And he needed new batteries, right? There's so many problems with electric cars, and yet the federal government keeps pushing them. So now we got power creation problems, like I mentioned in New Jersey, killing humpback whales potentially. And we also have distribution problems. California doesn't have enough electricity for electric cars they already have, and they're asking people to garage them. And you get a cold snap, and it's, hey, yeah, you can't charge your cars because we need electricity to heat the homes. and then you get a hot snap. Yeah, you can't charge your cars because you need electricity to run the air conditioning. Right, it goes on and on. Now it's turned out that the electric vehicle charging infrastructure is also a problem. Now, this is a really interesting problem because we've got electric cars on the road, we've got plug-in hybrids, and the nation's electric grid can't handle it, right? Because we're doing stupid things like depending on the sun being out 24 hours a day and the wind blowing 24/7, right? If you want safe, if you want green, you go with the new nuclear. There's no question about that. Intrinsically, inherently safe, using basic physics to make sure that it's safe, right? It's not like the old power plants. And some states and countries are even now turning their old power plants or old nuclear ones back online. Even the governor of California, Newsom, he went ahead and extended the lifetime of at least one nuclear plant out there in California that was supposed to be shut down. Because guess what? They need electricity, whether or not they have these stupid electric cars. So our 70-year-old behemoth of a U.S. electric grid is having some problems. We've got about 600,000 new electric vehicles on the road. And they're hooked up to what when they're being charged? They're hooked up to our critical national infrastructure, right? That's something that I ran some webinars for the FBI InfoGuard program about, that critical infrastructure. So what can you do? What should you do? What could possibly go wrong here? Well, as it turns out, quite a few things. First of all, these chargers that are out there, last numbers I saw, about 30% of them don't work. Period. They don't work. They're busted. They're broke. And then if you have an electric car, you may be able to bring around with you in your car some adapters to make sure it can get charged. If you're off the main roads, you may not be able to get a charge because there aren't enough electric chargers around. You know, it would be really nice. You pull into the hotel at night, you charge your car up. Well, again, can it charge it in time if it even has the right kind of chargers? And now, moving on to the next level, those chargers are smart, which means they've got a computer in them, at least one. And that smart charger is now going to take your account information, maybe from your credit card. Maybe you have an account with the company that's running the chargers, right? You got a Tesla. You bought it really early, so you still expect free electricity. All of that is being run on the computer right there. And those computers are now getting hacked. Think about the car again for a minute. We just talked a few weeks ago about all 16 major brands having serious cybersecurity problems with their APIs, or application programming interfaces. Serious problems. Problems so that programming interface can be used to hack your cars. So you're plugging that car into a computer that may or may not be able to hack your car, okay? You're putting private personal information, including financial information, which, of course, could be stolen by the bad guys because you're putting it into the computer. It's relying on the internet to get that information back and forth. And of course, the internet can certainly go down. And it's already been found that some of these charging stations are actually being used as jump points by the bad guys to hack other computers and to do denial of service attacks. In fact, there have been denial of service attacks on the charging stations. Imagine that. Imagine our military with electric vehicles. I know it's an important thing, right? Because the Obama administration's really put a lot of effort into that. Not just the yellow school buses being electric, but military vehicles. Yeah. A denial of service attack means that you are bringing that computer that you're targeting or multiple computers to their knees. So some of these charging stations have been knocked offline. What happens is there's more and more of them, right? The electric grid is built to give electricity. There are a few points on the grid that are feeding the grid. Now, there's a couple of grids. Texas has its own. There's a Northeast grid, right? There's more than that. Well, the current grid, it has about 9,200 generating units, 600,000 miles of transmission lines, more than 1 million megawatts of generating capacity, and it was built when the current electrical needs of a household were a few light bulbs and a toaster back in the 1960s. Now, I want you to think about your average night at home. Your kids are home, right? The kids are using their computers, their smartphones, their tablets. There are TVs in every room now. You're running a load of wash. The lights are still on because nobody turned them off, and I've got to go around and turn them off, right? That's every dad's job. And the bathroom lights, etc. Someone's playing video games. They got speakers going. You've got people streaming Netflix, Apple TV, etc. Microwave is running. Little kids are talking to Alexa. I had a toddler today. We were babysitting grandkids, and he asked Alexa to play this particular song for him. And you're charging your electric car. Now add 26 million more Teslas, and you can start to see the problem. Plus, the electric grid, of course, is supposed to distribute the electricity, not receive it. So when you start putting all of these little generators like wind turbines, solar panels, and in some cases these electric vehicles that also have petroleum-based engines, we're forcing this 1960s grid far beyond its intended use. And some people, of course, suggesting, well, why don't we go to a smart grid? Because, of course, smart makes everything better, right? Smart, whatever that means. And the idea behind it is it can give and receive power. The capacity will be much larger than we have now. Large loads like these electric vehicle charging stations, heating, cooling systems can crash the grid, and we have seen it. Remember Texas, winter? I think it was 2021. They almost got to the point where they would have been without electricity for, in some people, as much as 6 months. Because of what? Because the smart grid ain't so smart, because it doesn't exist. I wish people, politicians, would consider reality rather than just power and authority. CraigPeterson.com